So yeah, look guys, thank you so much for coming. It's great to have you all here, and so I've seen some familiar faces. Dave, it'd be nice if you actually bought something before you leave. Yeah, no pressure, there you go. Watch them lads. And look, if you have any questions or any queries about anything else we have upstairs, please just ask Paul, myself and Jordan will be on hand. I'm going to hand you over to Terry now, who's going to talk you through a few bits and pieces. He has had a few cocktails tonight, so just be aware, and I believe he's an ex-comedian.
Don't give it away, Jesus.
You'll find out in a minute. Ex-comedian, yeah, I said ex, yeah. So guys, once again, thank you so much. Enjoy your evening, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you.
Lovely to start an Irish whiskey night with an intro from a Scot. So we're first laugh done. That's it. So yes, thanks very much, as I said, Andy and Paul, for having us down here. My name's Terry, and I'm the brand ambassador for Hinch Distillery. I started with the company, it would have been around May 2021, and I initially started as a tour guide, then moved to senior tour guide, and within just over the last 6 months have shifted my way into brand ambassador. So I've been coming to the distillery for cash, basically. So we're nearly 3 years now. Always have kind of worked with alcohol in some way or another. Before this, I used to manage an Irish bar when I lived out in New Zealand. And then whenever I came home, I became a tour guide in Crumlin Road Jail. If anybody hasn't been up to Belfast, Crumlin Road Jail, really good tourist spot. It is one of the most haunted buildings in Ireland. I then changed job, but I still work with spirits. And as Andy kindly mentioned, I also make a brutal attempt at stand-up comedy every few months. You've seen my work. So the distillery itself then, just to kind of give you a wee bit of background on Hinch, we are going to start tasting fairly soon, so don't be worrying. Hinch Distillery was open to the public from November 2020, and as you will remember, 2020 was a fairly quiet year in terms of tourism and hospitality, but it was a fantastic year for drinking alcohol, so it worked out fairly well for us, even with lockdown. We opened to the public around June 2021, and I was actually privileged enough to take the first tour around the distillery. So I've been there since the doors kind of opened to everybody. The distillery itself, we broke ground around 2016 before I was with the company, and the brainchild for Hinch really began around 2010, and probably even years before that. I will be corrected by different ones as the nights go on, or the night itself. But we were set up by our founder and chairman, Dr. Terry Cross, OBE. It's always a nice bit of confusion, the same first name, different surname, very different bank accounts, I can assure you. But Terry, thank you very much. Lovely, much appreciated. So at the minute, we're passing around the first whiskey we're going to be tasting, but we will get to that in due course. So Dr. Cross, Terry, he originally started with a packaging company from very, very humble beginnings in North Belfast. He had a company called Delta Print, and they had done most of the packaging for KFC, McDonald's and Burger King throughout Europe during the 80s and 90s. So if you bought a Happy Meal during those years, thank you very much, because it's partly the reason we're here today. He then sold that company and he bought a chateau in Bordeaux as his retirement project, as we all do. Mine is in Provence, he went for Bordeaux. But as I said, Terry, he bought Chateau de la Ligne, and if you've ever seen the Channel 4 documentary, Escape to the Chateau, it was essentially that without the camera crew. It was a rundown, crumbled old building, a 15-hectare vineyard full of weeds. He restored it, replanted the vineyard, built up the chateau itself to its former glory, and then started producing Chateau de la Ligne wine. And that was really Terry's professional introduction into the world of alcohol. He then came home around 2010 and he purchased Kilkenny Estate, which is our home. So the distillery here, you can see a bit of it. There's booklets on the table there as well if you want to have a wee flick through if I'm boring you at any stages. But it's an absolutely beautiful setting. Kilkenny Estate goes back to 1859. And the estate was originally built for the 4th Marquess of Downshire while he was waiting for Hillsborough Castle to finish construction. He then moved off and upgraded. The estate became a rectory for St Andrew's Church, which is just up the road from us. It moved into private ownership. The most recent owners were F.G. Wilson, the lads that were over the Caterpillars, so all the diggers. And then Terry took ownership. And as I say, Hinch then became the brainchild. So that is roughly how we came about. We take our name from Balnahinch, which means town of the island. If you haven't been up north at recent times, people always wonder where the name comes from, but it's our neighbouring town. Irish whiskey itself obviously goes back much, much further. I know I'm not talking to a group of novices, but for anybody, if it is your first kind of whiskey tasting or you're new to it, in a nutshell, Irish whiskey, we can go back to roughly around the year 1000 AD. Christian monks travelled out of Ireland and made their way across Europe spreading the word of God. It was very thirsty work. By the time they got down to what's now the Mediterranean, they picked up the technique of perfume distillation, believe it or not. It was essential oil that was mixed with things like thyme, heather and lavender. They would have put it into devices like these on a much smaller scale, removed the water molecules, tightened up the liquid, and that was the very early forms of perfume. The monks took this practice home with them and began to play about with the recipe, and by the early 1200s they had produced a liquid that humans could finally drink. Thanks be to God. And it was thanks be to God, because what they were making, they thought it was divine. The liquid itself had medicinal properties. It would alleviate any sore head or chest pains if you'd swollen joints, even if you just rubbed it on your body rather than drinking it. And whenever they were consuming the liquid, it was very different from what we are drinking now. It would have been called Ishkabaha or Aquavita, the water of life. They took it in minute form, probably a couple of drops under the tongue. And because humans were so new to high proof alcohol at that stage, it made them feel like they were leaving the earth and beginning to float off into the heavens. And that's how we get the name spirit, because they literally thought they were starting to touch the gods or thin the gap between here and the ethereal. So, fun fact. So that would have been around the 1200s. They then began to smuggle the liquid in barrels and transport it, and that's what began to give it its colour and parts of its flavour. So a lot of the things that we take for granted now as a basic given of whiskey production, it was all done for different reasons. Everything is penicillin. It starts off with a different objective. The first ever writings of Irish whiskey, now I say, there's always a great debate, and Andy, please don't get angry, whether the Scots or the Irish invented whiskey first. Scottish man will tell you something very different. I'm going to tell you the truth. So, the first ever writings of Irish whiskey were in 1405, and that was in the annals of Clonmacnoise, just off the banks of the River Shannon. It was said that a Celtic chieftain drank a suffete of Ishkabaha during their pagan or their Christian celebration for what would have been Christmas time, roughly. So he basically drank a flask of whiskey during a feast, and he then subsequently died. Nowadays, he's what we would call a lightweight. So that was in 1405. The first ever writings of Scottish whiskey were not until 1495, and that was in the scrolls of the Scottish Exchequer, and it was said that a monk had bought a bushel of barley to distill whiskey for the local area for health purposes. Now, as I say, that there was in the Scottish Exchequer, annals of Clonmacnoise. It's all hearsay because there was a huge interaction across the Irish Sea between the Celts at that stage, Ireland and Scotland, all part of kind of Hibernia. And as a wee lady did correct me on tour one day, she said, "Son, that proves one thing and one thing only, that the Irish knew how to write before the Scottish." And that was it. So, the debate continues. Whiskey production. You'll get your time, Andy. So it's whiskey production now. As we know, Irish whiskey is typically triple distilled in copper pot stills, you can see here. And that would have been really the main style of whiskey production up until the early 1900s, and then things began to take dramatic shifts and kind of splinter off. Column stills, whenever they came about in the 1850s with Ennis coffee, it essentially got rid of this part of the vessel, and it was a long, tall column, and you could drip feed the liquid. It sped up the process of distillation, give you a really strong, high-proof alcohol. Ennis coffee took it around Ireland, and people said this is not the craft and care and the tradition that we have been brought up with. We don't want it. Some people said that. Other people said this tastes like shite, feck off. And they then took it to Scotland, and they absolutely lapped it up because it was faster and cheaper. So it pushed Scottish production at a time whenever Irish whiskey was struggling. Different political and socio-geographical factors like partition, a couple of world wars thrown in there, prohibition in America saw Irish whiskey absolutely collapse. There were only 2 distilleries here in the 60s, and now we are kind of in the middle of the Irish whiskey renaissance. We're seeing a huge uplift. Largely, we have to actually give thanks to gin distillation, believe it or not. They changed the gin laws around 2003, meaning that you could start a much smaller production scale, and then it opened the floodgates for different businesses to get their foot in at a much more manageable level. So that brings us right up to now. It's about 1,000 years of history in a few minutes. There will be a written exam at the end. I do hope you were listening. So we are going to do a quick bit of tasting with our 5-year-old. Now, this isn't the main focus of the evening. We're here to talk about our Madeira and sing about our latest launch. But just to give you a wee bit of a sample of Hinch, we have our 5-year double wood. Double wood, meaning it's done in 2 barrels. We'll start this off for 4 years in an ex-bourbon, and then we'll finish for 1 year in a virgin oak. Ex-bourbons, 98% of whiskies will start in them at some stage. And again, it's a trend and an accident of history that came about after Prohibition. In America, 1933, when alcohol became legal again, it was put into law that bourbon had to go into a brand new barrel each and every time, and America was left with a surplus of casks. At that point, Ireland and Scotland had been really heavily deforested. Again, we could go into the politics, but we're here to talk bottles, not borders. But the forests of Ireland and Scotland, we had gone from about 90% to 9% in less than 2 centuries. So Irish oak was pretty much depleted. The Irish and the Scots and the rest of Europe were crying out for barrels, and the Americans were more than happy to send them our way. Bourbon itself is a corn-based spirit, and so it's typically very sweet, which suits the American appetite. Ireland, we typically use barley. Sometimes you'll get a bit of oats or rye thrown in there as well, but the vast majority of the time it's going to be barley. Asian whiskies, you're going to be working with rice. It is whatever locally abundant starch you have, plus water, plus yeast. You have alcohol, boil it up, condense it down, you're on your way to making a spirit. So the 3 stills, if anybody hasn't been up to the distillery itself, as Andy said, it's an absolutely beautiful spot. The owner, Terry... No, fair enough. Check it back. It's grim. It is. But it's really, really... I think it's a lovely spot. But really, really good set. And Terry has a big eye for detail. So when you're sitting out in the courtyard, there's a big, big glass mezzanine and you can look out onto the stills. Our 3 stills are named after 3 mountains in County Down. We have Donard, Croob and Wee Binion. Donard's named after Slieve Donard, which is the highest peak in the north. Croob is the source of the River Lagan, which flows through Belfast, and Wee Binion overlooks the Silent Valley where we draw our water from. So the liquid that we're drinking at the moment, now this is a blended whiskey. We are a young distillery. We only turned 3 years old this month. So the liquid that Will and Emma and the rest of the production team have been producing very, very hard for the last 3 years is still sleeping. So this here liquid, as I say, is blended. There's a real kind of a myth around single malt about it being a better and purer whiskey. We'll get into the kind of difference of that. But there's beautiful blended whiskies out there and there's absolutely rotten single malt. It is all personal preference. This one, as I say, it's a blend that's been done for 4 years in the bourbon, which gives it a wee bit of a sweeter undertone. The virgin oak then. So this is a wee stave, side of a barrel. A barrel is essentially like a sponge. Whenever you take an ex-bourbon in from the States, there's what's called the devil's cut, and that's a wee bit on the side there. It holds about 6 litres or 3% of the previous liquid that was in it. So whenever we get the ex-bourbon in, that's going to give a huge sweet infusion. Whenever we use a brand new barrel or a virgin oak, it's like a clean sponge. So it sucks up all that sugar and gives it in way more kind of woody and leathery notes. So with your wee nosing glass, this is mine. I was going to drink yours. You've probably all had a wee sip and a smell at this stage because I've been chatting away. But you can see it has a lovely kind of light amber to it, wee bit of a kind of goldy hue. If you want to hold your glass up, if you can find the light source and just give it a wee swirl. Can be done, can be done. Follically challenged. My line on it is BBC, bald by choice. Thank you very much. So yes, whenever you're looking at your whiskey, when people swirl their glass, typically what they're trying to do is just look really, really pretentious. And that's it. No, what we're after is, see the wee cling around the side? With whiskey, you're looking for the tears. So you can see your wee droplets forming down the side. Our whiskey's overproofed. Swirling your whiskey, again, it is a bit of a catch that came about before Prohibition, mid-1850s, when there was poorly distilled alcohol moving through America. They used to cut it with water so that people wouldn't physically drop dead or go blind in the bar. If you drink enough methanol, it'll cause your retina to detach, and that's where we get the phrase blind drunk. I'm sure none of you are familiar with the sensation. But yeah, so people would have swirled their alcohol. If they saw the water droplets flying off the edge of the glass, they knew that their drink had been tampered with. They were being overcharged. So whenever you're in a bar in the future, you can have a wee swirl and know what you're chatting about. And if you do it well enough, you can make a living out of it. But nose in the whiskey then. I will always say, start easy with it. To say you've probably had a wee sip as it is. I usually try to begin at chin level and then just take a nice big deep breath in. As you make it up roughly about 1 inch from your face, if you focus and try to breathe through your mouth, you'll get a far better flavour read of it. Your lungs are still doing the work, but there's a much more delicate pull. You're not ripping those vapours past your cilia hairs. It's high alcohol, so you can get a bit of chemical burn if you go in too strong. So I'll usually find a nice kind of deep breath, roughly about 1.5 inches from your face. So the 5-year to me is a very typical Irish whiskey profile. Whenever we're doing shows and stuff away, if somebody's being very, very restrictive and limiting themselves, usually people will taste everything. But if somebody says, if I can only taste one Hinch product, what would you recommend? I'll go for the 5. It's the nice balance of, say, you get that wee bit of kind of, I'd say like an almond or a marzipan on the nose. There's a definite kind of gentle nut comes in. You'll get a little bit of that there leathery, more savoury hits, and then a nice peppery kick right at the start. Tasting wise, again, I would say that this is a whiskey tasting evening. It is not a whiskey drinking evening. That's going to happen afterwards. So join us upstairs. Yeah, lovely. Good to know. But yeah, so for tasting, I'd say a wee bit on the tip of the tongue. You're not even really trying to take a huge mouthful or to swallow it as such at this stage. It's just about introducing it to your palate. So, sláinte. So the 5-year, as I say, for me, it's a really good all-rounder. Whenever I worked in the Irish bar, we were always looking whiskies that you could drink neat and do a bit of playing about with and use it in a cocktail as well. The 5-year holds its own and it's a good level playing field. Another one of our younger SKUs is the small batch, which is just done in an ex-bourbon for 4 years. And it's super, super sweet. If you like a bourbon, it's right up your street. But the sweetness and the sugariness of it is quite hard to mask. And if you add different bits like sugar syrup and lime juice to it, you're getting a real kind of fuzzy teeth sensation. With the 5-year, as I say, it's a wee bit more neutral. It still shines through, you get that nice base, but the other elements can jump into it. So the cocktail that you had upstairs in the beginning, that is called the Ballyapple, and it was made by the guys in the Sensorium Belfast, which is part of the Spirit Circle. They do a lot of walking tours, food tours, tasting tours. They're based in the National. And one of the guys from there, Phil, took a couple of our SKUs, played about and came up with a whole list of cocktails. They surveyed it for over a month and it was their kind of, the Hinch listing was basically their special serves when they were doing the tours. Surveyed over 500 people and the Ballyapple came out absolutely top of the list. So I'm sure you'll agree it is dangerously drinkable. I had about 3 of them myself upstairs. But it is very, very simple mix. It is 5-year-old double wood, lime juice, sugar syrup and a wee bit of cloudy apple juice with a wee dehydrated apple garnish. Really, really simple to make, but a very quick, sophisticated, fancy serve that you can throw together fairly handy. So the 5 years, I say, it's a bit of an all-rounder, and it's a nice introduction to the general flavour profile that we're working towards with Hinch. So, on to this fella here, who actually knows what he's chatting about. So yes, Will is our head distiller. This is probably a good intersection to bring Will into the game.
Previously worked at the Copeland Distillery in County Down as well, so more of a craft distillery with a hand in different types of spirits. So I was tasked with taking their distillery to market. We ultimately had a bonder essentially, so we were buying in gin, macerating County Down fruits and selling it off as gin. It was a brainchild of Gareth, who gave his 9-to-5 job. He crowdfunded his distillery and then built up enough funds and following to eventually establish a brand and a brand home. So we bought a facility in Donaghadee, and I was tasked with taking the gin to market, whiskies, rums, and potchings as well. So multi-serial distillery, loads of flexibility, pretty much was allowed free rein to do whatever I wanted. And then around the same time, the Hinch distillery had started as well. I'm a whiskey fan through and through, always have been, so it's something that I've always wanted my entire focus to be on. So an opportunity arose post-commissioning at Hinch to help take them, as I said, after commissioning, take them up to capacity, and then that's when I joined in May 21. So since then I started as a distiller. Very shortly after that I became head distiller, and again we've been very fortunate. Terry's talked about most of the history of the distillery. It's, for those that haven't been there, it's an incredible facility. Very few modern new distilleries that have been built in the last number of years have what we have at Hinch. And it was ultimately my attraction. I left pretty much a dream job. Didn't think it could get better. Said it didn't really answer to anyone. Was allowed to do whatever I wanted, and but to move to Hinch, a distillery with scale, with bottling, maturation, the potential to grow our own barley within a 40-kilometre radius is incredibly attractive. As I said, with our own maturation facilities, a lot of places don't, a lot of modern facilities don't have these opportunities, so it was pretty much a no-brainer for me. So from when I started in May 21, there's been an awful lot of changes. The distillery was designed to produce 400,000 litres of pure alcohol, 3.5 million bottles of single malt if you want, based on a Monday to Friday 9 to 5, or not 9 to 5, 24/5 operation. May, it was in May this year, so it took about 12 months to actually get the project off the ground and the new plant and stuff in. So we took the plant from 400,000 up to 1 million litres of whisky annually. Again, without altering our spirit production, our distillation speeds, fermentation time. We started off with 6 washbacks, we now have 10, which allows us a standardised fermentation time. So previously we were running off, coming in the Monday, we had approximately 120-hour fermentation. Towards the end of the week, as we were producing, we ended up at the 50-55-hour fermentation, so we had mixed fermentation times. We wanted to standardise that, so we added 10 washbacks, which allows us to ferment consistently between a minimum of 82 hours right up to 85, and that's standard across the board. It's approximately double of what industry standard is, so it allows us a really nice fruity profile in our spirit. Again, the key to this project was not affecting what we produced before. So here we are. As I said, we're what? May this year we expanded the distillery. It hasn't stopped since. So we've the success of our current products, our current portfolio. We needed to expand, but we also seen an opportunity. Irish whiskey's massively in the up. And 400,000 litres seems like a lot. It seems like a lot to some of the new distilleries. In the grand scheme of things, it's nothing. There's distilleries out there producing 70 million litres. There's distilleries producing 1.6 million litres a week. So 400,000 is a very small figure. And again, when you compare it to our friends in Scotland, all that. All that. I'm a massive Scots fan, by the way. But we did start. We'll talk later. We did distill first.
We like a peated, to be fair though. We like a peated.
So yeah, that's pretty much the capacity story of the distillery. The exciting thing is we still have more. So at the minute we're running 1 million litres of alcohol. We can go to 1.6 with our current equipment, again without altering distillation speed. We don't need 1.6, so we're not going to produce it. Unfortunately, all the things we've faced over the last couple of years, COVID, war in Ukraine, has had a massive impact on all of us. We like to be transparent. In 2020, 2021, we were paying £400 for a ton of barley. This year we touched 1,000. So it's a very different beast over the last couple of years. Challenging. A lot of the distilleries reduced the production, and again, testament to the man that who wanted the distillery and opened it and funded it, has kept going. He wasn't obviously spending enough. He decided to double the capacity. We went again, kept going, and we have more, and we're currently in talks of being able to take that to the next step. So where we're at now in terms of our barley, I said we're currently working with cooperative, local farmers, not single farms, just growing in County Down. That's what we want. So this year, or 2024 coming in, we will have about 45 to 50% of our production, all our barley, all grown in County Down. At the minute, all we've produced to date is single malt Irish whiskey. This year, and we'll peated as well, still Irish whiskey, still Irish single malt, and pot still will be coming in 2024 as well. So there's a lot happening with the distillery. In terms of the plant, we have a very unconventional malt setup as such. We have a 2-brew vessel, or two vessel brew house as such. So most malt distilleries will simply have a lauter tun, and we have a mash conversion vessel and a lauter tun. It allows us quicker turnaround times, meaning we can put more through the brew house without affecting the overall quality. It means we don't need to use enzymes, which we're allowed to do, but we don't need to. We pay an awful lot of money for the malt, and we don't need to pay for those things. So yeah, so 2024 is a really exciting year for us with the County Down grown barley being produced and eventually running through the plant. So very, very exciting for us.
To me, Irish whiskey was always sweet, floral, fruity. You could kind of go every different direction to travel. Scottish whiskey was smoky or very smoky, and Will and the rest of the team, to be fair, but Will very much opened my eyes to peated whiskey and the huge potential of Irish peated whiskey. We're going really off tangent here because we're going to be tasting something that's not peated at all. But with the two styles of the fermentation, Will had explained we can do like a 2.5 distillation rather than a triple or rather than a double. It's a mixture of the two, so you get the benefit of the cleanness of a triple distilled whiskey, so there's no burn or kind of scratchiness, but you still get that real punch and weight of your typical Scotch. So seeing and that was just tasting it as a spirit rather than fully matured whiskey. So from a self-confessed whiskey novice to see what we're working towards with and Hinch and the machinery we have and the creativity and the team that's driving behind it, it's quite a cool, exciting type of thing. As I say, it's a big category that's up and coming. But yeah, just to throw my 2 cents in for that.
Yeah, on that we do produce a lot of peated. About 30% of what we produce is peated. Said I'm a massive Scotch fan, always have been. Some of the first whiskies I was introduced to. With a modern plant, relatively traditional brewing methods. We've loads of flexibility in what we can do. A lot of plants don't have that, like they're very one-dimensional, they can only do certain things. We've got all the bells and whistles. People say that automation takes the art out of making whiskey. I've been standing mash tuns with shovels, wellies, feet burnt off me for 18 hours trying to get a wort to run through a mash filter. I'll stand here and argue with anyone about automation. It's an incredible thing. We trust it. We ultimately still tell it what to do. We just don't have to be standing beside certain pieces of equipment, and it also allows us to have the rest of the team doing what's really important and in warehouses, pulling samples, looking at the spirit, when we can trust the automation process that we have inside. So again, it allows our people to not be stuck looking at screens or pipes all day. We allow people to go out and interact with the spirit. So automation is an amazing thing. I've done 10 years of zero automation and burning rags to see what colour the spirit ends are coming off. I started making potion with my granda at a very young age, so that's where that came from. Yeah, the distillery is incredible. Loads of flexibility, and I said you see 3 stills. We don't always run 3 stills. We've got double distillation. We've got 2.5 times distillation. We'll triple the still, and then we'll add stuff from the second still into it as well. So we've got you can see there's 3 boil balls on all of our stills. So we've got like we can create really nice light fruity floral spirits. But we run a full water tun like a mash tun, so we create a heavy cloudy wort, which increases our nuttiness. So it's not just about the fruity characters, the lightness. We've got stills that can do that, so we create heavy types of wort as well. Yeah, so I'll actually get back to what I'm meant to be talking about, which is the Madeira. Terry's talked about the 5-year-old, so it is probably one of our best-selling products. Double maturation, 5 years. So the initial concept was 4 years in bourbon cask, a year in virgin American oak. As we've got older and older, we've increased our maturation profile. Most of the whiskies in both of these bottlings is a lot older than 5-year-old. So we've got malt at nearly 8 years of age and grain at 7. So we do. So again, across both. Again, the youngest element is 5, so we have to keep the 5-year-old age statement, but about 80% of what's actually in these bottles is nearly 8 years of age. The Connoisseur collection, that ultimately came from, we have an incredibly young distillation team, production team, right across the board. Probably argue that it's one of the youngest in the industry. I'm a grand old age of 30. A lot of the guys are younger than me as well, which is very young for a distilling team and a very big facility. It's not we can chat about craft and stuff. It's a major production facility. So again, very young across the board. We want to experiment. We want to try new things. talking about bourbon casks and virgin American oaks. We've all travelled the world, we've all been to different parts. I've spent a lot of time in the south of Portugal, hence Madeira. So I, again, over many a tea board, thoroughly enjoyed this. Really, really nice dessert wine, sweet. Again, with the lighter element of the grain, we knew this would work. I've worked with Madeira Cask again across multiple spirits, gin, whiskey and rum. It adds an incredible depth to the whiskey. It's very sweet. There's 66 grams of sugar per litre left in this, residual sugar in the casks. You can taste that. Incredible with cheese, but also with a really clean, light, fruity spirit that we have in our bottles. Pre going into double or into virgin American oak, it adds really, really good depth. Again, because we're young, we want to be spirit forward. All of our casks, we have a massive policy on refilling barrels, not using brand new wood for casks as well. So with the style of spirit that we produce, we want to use refill barrels as well. But the Madeira, as you can see, the colour, if you want to take a look at it, everything we do, especially in limited bottlings, our core range is bottled at 43%. It is chill filtered, and occasionally, not to the 5-year-old, we've removed this entirely. We have previously added colouring to it. Part of how we do it, again, whiskey is a very hard game to change. We have the first product that we've got any colouring and will be all chill filtering removed from is our 5-year-old. We wanted to be spirit forward. We want to give, we're whiskey drinkers, and we want people to enjoy that. We don't want to remove anything. We spend an awful lot of money putting flavour into these things. We don't want to take it out. So,
to jump in, sorry. So if anybody's not 100% on chill filtering, because again, I wasn't. Chill filtration is basically, correct me if I'm wrong, where you chill the whiskey to less than 5 degrees Celsius and run it through a very thin copper pipe, and that strips out any final fats and impurities. For larger production, it's done for more consistency. So if you have a batch in May, it'll look the same as a batch in September. Commercially, it's viable because it gives you a clean, consistent product line that looks and sells the same every single time. There was under two. So for a smaller individual run, when you don't chill filter it, the way I'll describe it on tour and different ones, it's like leaving more fat in your gravy. It's way more flavour and more richness and that kind of mouthfeel with it. So if anybody wasn't kind of with the chill filter side of it, because it was one that I'd heard it tossed about at different whiskey tastings and sat and smiled and nodded. And then one day I grew a set and said, what does that mean? So chill filter.
So with any of our limited releases and part of our ethos going forward, there will be no chill filtration. So everything that's in the bottle or in the cask, everything that we've paid for, worked hard to get in there, will be left in there, which means we will bottle at a higher strength. Anything bottled below 46% is subject to haze, flocculation, change of colour, sedimentation, all of these things. Again, it's flavour. There's nothing harmful. It wouldn't be in a bottle if it was harmful. It's that simple. So when you look at a bottle of wine that's been sitting on the shelf for a very long time and there's something in the bottle of it, it's yeast. Again, it wouldn't be in the bottle if it was harmful. Otherwise, someone's in a lot of trouble. So with a wee bottle of 46%, it ultimately removes or doesn't allow flocculation or haze unless it's added to, or there's a lot of water added to it, or it's put in a really cold climate. So at 46%, you'll see, and again, those that do have are not greedy like Michael, and that have something left of their original virgin casks. This will cling to the glass a lot better. It's thicker, there's a bit more age in it, and obviously the colour. So both of them now, none of them artificially coloured at all, but you can see the difference. Both the same age of bottlings, but the cask is ultimately now the difference. So 46%, loads of flavour, good in cocktails, but again, I'm a big whiskey drinker, so a couple of droplets of water, bit spicier. So again, that's ABV as well, so gives you the opportunity to, it's a lot easier to add something than take it out. So at the 43%, very palatable, good to drink at that strength. So for those that don't like higher ABV bottlings, a couple of drops of water, opens the spirit up, very, very nice. And again, we'll bring out aromas that you don't often get, but again, it's when we bottle stuff, if we bottle it at a lower ABV, we'll lose all that flavour. The volatiles come out straight away. You'll never be able to recapture it. when you bottle at a higher ABV, you're going to get that. And again, if you want to bring it down in strength in your own glass, in your own comfort, wherever you like drinking, that's the time to do it. Not sort of pre-bottling, because once you've taken it out, can't go back in, unfortunately. Marmalade, there's loads of orange and hazelnuts and stuff in here as well. So quite, again, as much as it's the same liquid, the cask has done their influence. We've only left this in there for 8 to 9 months, so it only really went through one maturation cycle. We could have left this in a lot longer, but said earlier, we like using refill barrels at the distillery, and depending on what we're filling in terms of new make at the time, there's certain casks that we move about to manipulate our profile going forward. We're 3 years old. In terms of our distillation, we're 3 years old. Our first whiskey was casked in start of December. So next year, and it's been a big debate over the last while. Will we release something in the coming months or next year? I think we should. We're a young distillery, so we've actually moved some of our 3-year-old spirit into the casks that these have just come out of, which is very, very exciting for us. Again, whiskey's a long game, and you've been doing this for 10 years, and you've went to 3 different distilleries and not seen anything that you've produced for 10 years or least. It's a very, very long game, so I'm obviously mad keen. Very, very exciting for us, and we're very happy with it. We've done blind tastings of spirit that's not even whiskey yet. Put it up against spirit that we have released at 4 or 5 years old, and it's come out on top. So very, very exciting. Again, we don't have the distillation constraints of bigger distilleries, contract distillers. We distill at our own speed, we set a speed and we stick to it. So we're very, very happy, very excited for next year. But in terms of this, in terms of the Connoisseur collection, this will not be the last one. I'll not tell you exactly what the next release will be. It'll probably be spring time next year. And France and apples. It's worked really, really well for us, the Madeira cask, and some we're very keen to keep doing. We set out to actually find these casks as well. We work with multiple partners across the world, and they were able to get us these. Madeira is a very hard place to get good casks out of, or get any casks out of. So hopefully you'll see a lot more Madeira finishes and full maturation coming from Hinch as well.
Port and sherry. There's a bit of a dual-edged sword with them. They're partly seen as like an older person's drink, and they have their more connotation of being your wee woman in Coronation Street with their thimble. That, and then there's a slightly trendier side of sherry coming in now, but as Will was saying, they're much more easily accessible. You can get a hold of sherry in port casks far handier than you'll get a hold of Madeira. Peter's read on Madeira was that it's the trendier side of that wine coming in. So again, it's like the peated category with an Irish in 5-6 years' time. You're going to see a hell of a lot more of it. So to be partly ahead of the curve with that that flavour profile, how niche it is.
And it's, like the guys that we tasked with finding these casks as well, we rejected 2 batches before actually settling on this. Just not happy with the nose of the cask, the age profile of the cask. So hopefully it's done its job. It has an awful lot yet more to give. We took this whiskey out relatively early for the cask. 8 months is not a very long finish. But again, we're a spirit-driven distillery. We want to be, so we don't want cask to take the entire influence. We want it to be about the liquid. You'll see an awful lot more of that from us going forward, being liquid-driven as opposed to cask-driven. Again, that's our jobs. We wouldn't be in jobs if it wasn't really about the liquid. So securing our future. Well done. So yeah, hope you've enjoyed it. There's more to come from the Connoisseur collection, and yeah.
Thank you.